Today I'm sitting with you more in a reflective way, a conversational way, because today in our sabbatical service, I'm going to ask you once again to be reflective, to be conversational, if not with those near you, at least with your own self. Because before us today is an astonishing story that is painted in the book of Numbers. I know, you read Numbers all of the time. You're very familiar with the story. I know. And indeed, I have to tell you, the story that we're going to hear today hits awfully close to home for anyone, anywhere who has ever tried to lead. In fact, maybe you're going to feel like you're herding cats when you hear this account. So let's turn together to the book of Numbers 11. If you have a Bible near you, have it open. I'm going to choose to read all different kinds of verses from this chapter, and I'm going to paraphrase them all in the version according to Suzanne. And before I jump in and around, let me remind you of the context for this book. You see, no sooner have the Israelites set out from the Mount Sinai than the complaining begins. Memories begin to creep up about their time in slavery. And instead of considering the back-breaking slave labor they endured under Pharaoh, or the drowning of babies and the pain and working every day, it's a memory all the same. They instead choose to remember the fish that they could eat for nothing, of flavorful cucumbers, melons, leeks, and garlic of all things. They are missing their garlic. So listen deeply to this odd account. You see, the people fell to grumbling over their hard life as they were following Moses. And as soon as the rabble rose and most of the people began to whine and complain, and they together were saying things like, "Why can't we have meat? We ate fish in Egypt. We got it for free." And to say nothing of the cucumbers and the melons and the leeks and the onions and the garlic, but nothing tastes good out here. Out here where we are in the desert, out here, all we get is manna, manna, manna. Now remember, people of God, the manna that they're referring to is that seed-like substance. It's kind of shiny. And the people during the wilderness, they were to collect it. They were kind of making these bread cake things. I'm assuming that they might have been like a delicacy. Maybe they had some honey to go with it. Honey cake sounds pretty good to me. And while they slept, here came the manna falling down every day. But it was, after all, just manna. And the people, they wanted all the things. They wanted the melons, and they wanted the fish, and they wanted the leeks, and I'm pretty sure they were tired of the carb-loading lifestyle. And honestly, they probably just wanted a good steak with lettuce after all. And not only that, they began to spend their evenings moaning and wailing. You know how it goes. You know what happens when the masses are agitated, hungry, and upset, right? And Moses hears all of this. Moses is frustrated, naturally so. But what's surprising about this version of the story is that it draws equal attention to Moses' disenchantment. You see, like the Israelites, Moses complains. Did you know that Moses complained about his leadership? His burdens, they're very great. He questions whether or not God is really with him. So let's jump back into the story and let's listen to Moses' complaint, shall we? You see, Moses hears all the whining, all the families that are whining in front of their tents. There's whining, and God's anger began to blaze up. And Moses saw that things were in a very bad way. And so Moses calls out to God, has a conversation, and says to God, "Why? Why, oh God, are you treating me this way? Why? What did I ever do to deserve this? Did I conceive these whiners and complainers? Was I their mother? No. So why are you dumping the responsibility of all of these people on me? God, why are you telling me to carry them around like a nursing mother? Why am I carrying them all the way to the land that you promised to their ancestors? Where on earth am I supposed to get meat for all of these people who are tired of the manna, who are whining to me? Give me meat, Moses. Give me meat, Moses. Give me meat. All we want is meat. I can't do this thing by myself, God. It is way too much. All of these people. And if this is how you intend to treat me, God, you know what? Just do me a favor. Just kill me now. I've seen enough. I've had enough. Just let me out of here. You know, church, I'm especially struck by Moses' cry out to God today. The burden of leadership that's become so profound, so heavy, in fact, that not only does he beg God to take that mantle off of him, but that death itself would be preferable. And I'm not especially proud to say that I know something of what Moses felt then. These past months, over a year now, you too have experienced wide sweeping changes. Stops, starts, curious iterations of Florence Christian Church. You've also experienced changes in your business. Some have gone well, maybe some haven't. Maybe even your home life has been upended by what we know as COVID-19. Not only that, your typical pastors are on sabbatical. What is sabbatical anyway, right? And you have these services like this that are virtual. You're not even together in the sanctuary. It has been so hard. You've had to step up into leadership in all of those places, and it's been so hard. And the pandemic has made everything so hard and heavy. And on top of all of that, if that wasn't enough, this sabbatical season with one another, with myself and Reverend Parker coming alongside to help you stop and start and realign and change and do it again and then back to the beginning. I know it's felt difficult. I know it's felt strange. I know that you've been on the mountaintop and in the desert. I know. I've been there with you. And maybe you're feeling a little lost in the wilderness right now. Maybe you are tired of the manna too. You know, recently I came across this story. It was a story of the soldier's widow's home, which once stood on the banks of the Kankakee River in Wilmington, Illinois. It was founded in 1895, and its whole mission was to address the needs of impoverished and or abandoned widows and daughters of Civil War veterans. You see, prior to this, at least in Illinois, there existed another home for veterans and their wives. However, once the husband died, the widows had to leave, and they were left with nowhere to go because they weren't married anymore. And so it was that a woman leader by the name of Flo Jamison Miller, though not the first superintendent of the home at Wilmington, apparently was the one who carried the vision forward and brought this institution into being. Now, of course, it is impossible for us to get into the 19th century mind as much as people might think that they can, but I have especially been curious about her motivation. So here's what I found out. Here's what I know. Flo's father was a Civil War veteran. And when he mustered out in 1865, he had attained the rank of colonel. And she was a small child during the war, and so I would safely presume that her father was absent during the formative time in her life. And also, her father died when she was still relatively young. You see, Flo was only 19 years old when he died, and from what I can tell from my reading, her mother was in her care until her death 26 later. So think about that. Flo didn't really know her dad. Dad dies at 19. Now she's taking care of her mom for another 26 years. Now, in addition, Flo was considered one of the foremost patriotic speakers of her gender in that time. She was among those who advocated that patriotism be taught in schools. Now, perhaps this seems a bit odd today, I get it. But evidently, at the end of the Civil War, there was not a common sense of country. Imagine that. Think about our history. You see, we were still a nation of first-generation immigrants. Now, no doubt the fact that she put her life's energy towards first the formation of and later actually running the Soldier's Widow's Home in Wilmington, and it was rooted in all of this and more, I'm sure. And once the initial dream was accomplished, however, if you read her semi-annual reports, because, you know, I'm a nerd, you can certainly detect her frustration, for it seems that she had envisioned a place of culture where these women would be offered some of what had been so meaningful to her in her own life. But instead, she was left to see to the needs of more than 80 elderly women whose bodies and spirits were worn down by the demands of difficult and mostly impoverished lives, many who had been left alone, many just abandoned by surviving children, a changing nation and culture, and all of this time, they didn't have the means or the understanding which would be at our disposal now to address everything from arthritis to dementia. It was hard going. And it was surely not made any easier by the residents of the home. Let's think about that for a minute. Think about that. For so it was that in the year 1905, Flo Jamison Miller, superintendent of the Soldier's Widow's Home at Wilmington, was investigated by the Board of Public Charities of the state of Illinois. The charges brought forward included mistreatment by the superintendent. And among other things, they said that she was not giving them enough to eat, particularly potatoes. Literally, that's what the Decatur Evening Herald said on July the 5th, 1906. She was later acquitted. But oh, can't you just hear the echo of the rabble that are quoted in today's account in Numbers? We want meat, Flo. We want some potatoes, Flo. Moses, we're tired of the manna. If only we had meat to eat. We remember the fish we used to eat in Egypt for nothing, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the garlic, and the onions. And now our strength is all dried up, Moses. There is nothing at all to eat but this manna to look at. One can understand Moses' despair. I can. This same despair that I think probably was shared by Flo Jamison Miller and any other leader or sense who simply did what they thought they were supposed to do and were left to deal with the complaining of an ungrateful community. She and all of us who have found ourselves there can certainly resonate with Moses' cry, just take it away from me. Moses is so frustrated, he calls out to God and says, why, God, have you treated your servant so badly? What have I not done? How have I not found favor in your sight? Why do I have all the burdens of these people on me? Where am I going to get meat to give these people? Clearly, Moses had had it. Yes, this is where the story in Numbers always hooks me. For more than once, at various times in my ministry, when a seemingly petty complaint has been brought to my attention, I have been known to grumble, even if only to myself. Doesn't that person know that we have people dying here? And often we do, of course, for the nature of ministry is in part to walk with and tend the needs of the suffering, the dying, the grieving, the changing, the different, the wilderness wanderings of the people of God. And even I have been known to say, don't they know I'm doing my best to meet the varying needs and not just theirs? I might have been known to say that. Now, good people, you're a community of teachers and business owners and community leaders, and I'm pretty sure you too know that of which I speak. And yet, at least at this point, I'm fascinated that God does not only join in Moses' lament. A few verses later, those complaining actually get their due. It's a terrible story in Numbers. Even so, the God has them eat and eat and eat the meat until it is coming out of their noses. Keep reading. And even so, our God sees Moses' despair as a cry for help. And guess what the response is to Moses from God? Let's pick up the reading again. God says to Moses, okay, Moses, gather together 70 among the leaders of Israel, those who you know to be respected, to be responsible. And I want you to take them into the tent of meeting. And I'm going to meet you there, Moses, and I'm going to meet those 70 leaders, and I'm going to come down and I'm going to speak. And I'm going to take some of the spirit that is on you, Moses, that I gave to you, that mantle of leadership, and I'm going to give it to them, some of those 70, because then they will be able to take some of the load of this people that are weeping and gnashing their teeth. And you, Moses, you're not going to have to carry the whole thing alone anymore. And God gives Moses what Moses needs, a break. Namely, a break, and yet other people who will then stand alongside Moses, speaking a prophetic word to the people. For surely, church, we can take from this that we are not meant to do this alone. You see, inside this story, we're all reminded that sometimes God gives unexpected people in unexpected places the ability to lead, to hold the people, to carry on. So I find myself struck today by this story. And while I'm not especially proud to say that I know something of what Moses felt then, maybe you do too, God holds that. God is working. So no, complaining is never good. And yes, it never fails to surprise me that when we're in a hard place, we often find ourselves wishing for what once was, how church felt and looked, what we used to do. Remember when all those families were coming, even when, as in the case of the people of Israel or the residents of the Soldiers' Widows' Home at Wilmington, our present circumstance has given us life itself. Even then, sometimes we complain. And the complaining isn't good. But neither is our tendency as leaders to do it all alone, allowing ourselves to sink into the kind of despair that Moses experienced. That is what this sabbatical has been about for your leaders. And you've risen up, I hope. Like I said, I understand Moses. I understand the complaining rabble. I, too, find myself wondering now what it would look like to be grateful, meat and potatoes or not. And I find myself wondering where God's Spirit will rest next, who God will raise up to do the work with me. Who is God raising up right now at Florence Christian Church with us so that we might more rightfully and faithfully do the work that we're all called to do? It can't just fall on Pastor Susan and Pastor Diana and Pastor Tracy. I'm only here for a couple more weeks, and I can't help but wonder how this story might have ended differently if Moses had only recognized his need for help sooner. Because the good news is that I don't want us to miss this in the passage, is that God always, always rises leaders up, always. And it might not look the way that we wanted to, but God is faithful in the midst, and God is moving us and coming alongside of us and saying, get ready, I'm doing a new thing. In this season, we've had leaders rise up to do comment moderation on worship services that are online. The amount of food that continues to get distributed at the food giving every single month, the school supplies that get gathered for our wider community. And it's important to think about how the church functions in relations to this narrative. You see, one person should not lead alone, whether it's playing the piano or answering the phone or corralling the youth or representing our church at a food pantry or running the AV metrics or you see, those in a position of leadership should be filled with the Spirit and equipped for the task, but never alone. God will provide guidance to God's people. Church, it's important right now that we cooperate with that guidance and we realize where God is at work. I know it will not look the same. And as we deliberate together in church about how to live and what comes next, the prophets call us to fidelity in Christ and keep us mindful of what God expects us to do. The people of God, as we make decisions and face difficulties like when to close a church and open for worship and back opportunities and to be careful with mass and not allow food and figure out food. You see, they shake us, these prophets, into our wide-eyed awareness of the needs of the present hour. And Florence, the needs of this present hour do not look like they do 2 years ago. It's a different world. And so I thought what might be most appropriate today in this service is for some pause and reflection time. Have you ever found yourself where Moses finds himself today as he's taking in the complaints of the people? Do you recognize yourself in those that are lifting their voices in complaint? Or do you see yourself in both? When you think about the church right now, on whom is the Spirit resting today? Is that surprising you? And why do you think that God addresses Moses' despair in this way first before dealing with the complaining crowd? What are we to take from this moment? Where are the leaders that are rising up among us?